So welcome all, and thanks so much for joining the discussion this afternoon, which we hope is going to be a sort of co-design session. We're going to tell you about our exciting project and hopefully get your input and insight into how we can make sure it's a success as we go forward. So as you are hopefully aware by now, in partnership with Swansea Council, we've been lucky enough to come up with a project to support buying regional in the city and county of Swansea. So this is a project that's supported by community renewal funding, which has come through from UK government, and it's a project to support more local sourcing among major organisations across Swansea. So if you know me and Zoe for the region and our colleague Julie as well, you'll know that we are always banging the drum for more local sourcing, for making procurement less of a barrier for smaller regional SMEs, and we've held lots of different conversations and events over the past 4 years on this very topic. So we couldn't be more delighted to be working in partnership with the council to deliver this project, which we hope is going to give us some really great success stories and some really valuable learning that we can build on over the coming months and years. But for the purposes of this project, it's a 6-month project that's got to be delivered by June, so we've got certain time constraints, and our goal is to work with major organisations such as yourselves to identify opportunities for more local sourcing. So we know, because we know most of you, we know that we don't need to sell you on the concept here. Like us, I'm sure you're all on board with the idea that the more of our spending that we can retain within the local economy, the better all round. So in terms of social value, in terms of local jobs and opportunities for local SMEs, the multiplier effect of keeping that spending in our local economy, and yeah, so many benefits that we're all well versed in about keeping spending local. But we also know from conversations we've had with you guys and with others that there are still obstacles, and although we're all on the same team and we all want more local procurement and for local businesses to be successful, there are obstacles. Sometimes it's because the right companies doing the right sorts of things don't seem to exist in our region. Sometimes it's because local companies just aren't getting themselves involved and not tendering for contracts as they come up. Maybe in some organisations there is a lack of time and resource to devote to developing the local supply chain. And then there's that all-important question of risk. Is it a greater risk to use smaller local suppliers? And so there's lots of question marks about that. So the purpose of today's discussion is probably to unpack some of those challenges from your perspective, understand whether we've got that right, whether there are other things that prevent local sourcing in certain categories of products or services, and really hear from you. But then discuss how we can make this project a success as we go forward. And very briefly, I'm just going to share our proposed sort of project plan. And again, I think you've all seen this because we've circulated this PDF already. But what we envision is that the project will start with a process of mapping the spending of major organisations such as yourselves. So that sort of benchmarking or baseline analysis of where you're currently spending most of your budgets, and identifying, well, only on a very high level and with a light touch, kind of mapping your existing spending. And then from that, identifying opportunities where there might be more opportunity to switch to a local supplier in a particular category. And as quickly as possible, we'd love to get to some real tangible opportunities where you say, okay, yes, we'd love some help to identify a new supplier or selection of suppliers for XYZ category of products or services, or we've got this upcoming tender opportunity and this might be one that you could help with. Identify some actual practical examples, and then we've got some time and resource on our end to do some, you know, one-to-one consultancy with you guys and to do that research across the county and across the region to identify suppliers in the right categories and hopefully signpost them to your opportunities, support them in getting involved in any tenders or requests for quotes, and see whether between us we can have some great success stories to celebrate at the end of the project, and lots of spin-offs potentially for us to explore together. Like, for example, should we co-create some kind of accreditation for local companies and organisations to demonstrate your commitment to relocalising some of your spending? What might that look like in terms of an accreditation or an award or a pledge or a badge? Yeah, how can we share the learnings from this project and enable more local sourcing among other businesses and organisations in Swansea? So it's a learning journey, but for us it's a great opportunity because it means we've actually got some time to help and to kind of try and unpick and to learn from what you're already doing and see if we can sort of disseminate the good practice that's already happening more broadly across organisations in the region. And really for us in the private sector and the independent sector to show how it's done and hopefully lead by example, and make it more accessible and doable for others. As I say, I think most of us are on board with the need for this, and hopefully you can help us to identify where our time and support or research would be best placed to add value to what you guys are already doing. So that's our sort of brief scene setting to kind of understand where we're coming from, and I thought we could start by asking each of you to introduce yourselves and let us know what has resonated with that brief project outline, whether this is a topic that you're actively concerned about or already working on, or any initial feedback in terms of what you think the needs, challenges and opportunities might be. So if that's all right, can I ask you each in turn to say hello to the group and share any reflections with us? So Craig, may I put you on the spot first? Craig from Coastal. Hi.
Hi, my name's Craig James. I'm an asset surveyor working for the maintenance department in coastal housing. I'm a big advocate of keeping the pound local as well and using local contractors and suppliers. So yeah, that resonates really well with me, because the main thing is when we're using local contractors, if there's any problems, any issues, you know they're on the doorstep to come back. Whereas in the past, we've used probably some from further afield and across the bridge, try and get them back for any issues and snagging issues. It's a big stumbling block. So I'm all for keeping and using local small, medium-sized businesses.
Yeah, thanks for raising that. And I know my colleague Julie will agree on that one. You know, the customer service and the level of aftercare that you get from buying local is really important.
Yeah,
thanks,
I know
Craig.
We've got to demonstrate value for money, but it's having that overall service as well.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point to start with. It's you know, it's no sacrifice, it's no compromise on quality, on service, or even on cost to buy locally. You should still be able to have a win-win-win on all those things and get the multiplier effect and all the other benefits. So it's not about asking people to spend more or lose out in any way. It's about how we multi benefits. Great. Thanks, Craig. Sheila, can I come to you next for a little brief introduction?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Sheila. I'm on the business support team for Avato UK. We only use, I agree with the concept of using local, especially over the last few years. Everybody needs the help now. So, but we only use a few for our site, as in flowers for reception or We have Milk Deliver, which are both local companies. If we've got large meetings being held at the site, we'll use it's a catering company called Starving Jacks. So they will deliver the buffets for us, and that all the ones we use are local. But we also have local companies come into and set up in reception who sell crafts, or when it comes to Easter, they're selling Easter eggs, or Christmas, the sweets, the selection boxes, all different sorts of small local companies. And as the staff are in and out, 9 times out of 10 people stop to buy. But that's all we use sort of locally.
Is it harder for you, sorry Dawn, is it harder for you to procure like cleaning services or washroom services locally because you're a bigger organisation?
Well, our facilities company is local as well. That's just down the road, and they do all our cleaning and supplying of the cleaning stuff, so they're local as well. Securitas, they're local as well, our security firm. The majority of people we use, the facilities manager, she's quite canny with where she shops, how she shops, and if she can get it cheaper, she'll get it, and it's usually local.
Thanks, Sheila. Great. It's good to hear all of that. And the question will be, as we go forward, whether there are opportunities to do more or whether you're already all over it. So yeah, we'll appreciate your insight as we go on. Thanks for that. Marcia, can I come to you?
Yes, of course. Hi everyone, my name is Marcia Sinfield and I'm the Chief Executive of Cradig. So Cradig are a housing association for those of you who don't know us. So I think this has been, as the first thing to say is probably an apology, because I think I should have probably brought along someone similar to Craig's equivalent into the meeting, and the diary got out of hand and I didn't make that connection. So I apologise for that, and going forward I'll make sure I address that and that we have someone closer to that area of spend in the meeting. So sorry. I think as Dawn and others will know, this question has been very much in our thought processes for a number of years. There have been exercises done previously to try and map areas of spend, and it's absolutely a commitment of leadership and the board of management of Cradig to pursue and actually make the most of the foundational economy, and that, as Craig says, that keep that pound local. So we really want to do more than we currently do to keep that very much in the minds of people making those decisions across the organisation, and also everything that we can do to hook up with other people buying similar products and services, so that we've got the economies of scale that go with that, and the joint conversation, and having the conversation once, rather than us all having lots of individual, as it was, sort of meet the buyer type conversations. I think we can see value with us helping to support those local to the area to be looking into the future, to be skilling up their businesses and taking account of the capacity that's in the pipeline for them to then respond to. I suppose one of the challenges for us is we have a mixed economy. So if we think of most of the spend going out in relation to sort of the management and maintenance of assets, as I think Craig says, if you get somebody doing something and they're inside the organisation as sort of a local DLO, or they're very close to the organisation because they're a local business and employer themselves, the impact that has on the satisfaction level of tenants, etc., is tangible. It makes a real difference, therefore, to the quality of the service that we can deliver. It just does. It just does. So this isn't just about supporting the economy, it's actually supporting the people who we're here to provide services to, and having a double tick of that community benefit. So things that can be done to support tenants and other people in the communities to be part of that story also works as well. So it's a virtual circle for us. There are obviously some challenges around it, aren't there, linked to procurement rules and how you do that, you know, properly and still, but I think those things are easing and will continue to ease over time, much more than they were maybe a few years ago. So I think it would be nice to try and identify as part of the project, you know, that mapping thing, but some real, as Dawn has spoken to, some tangible examples to progress. Because if we can just find a couple of tangible examples that have common ground across us all, we can sort of take the conversation further and deeper when we go beyond that. And then I guess my final point would be the technologies that sit around the delivery, because everything links into the sustainability piece at the moment as well, doesn't it? And I think it's therefore being mindful not only of the services you currently deliver, but having an eye to how you can support the local marketplace for how those services and assets are changing over time. So an example of that would be we've had some money to retrofit our houses, and we could have just gone to the usual person in the industry who had that skill set, and we had to do that for an element, but we also made it part of it that they upskilled the local provider as well. And those sorts of things will gradually over time support the region as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Marcia. We're delighted to have you here. And as you say, if there are other colleagues that would be useful for us to connect with as well, that would be great. But we're really delighted to have your buy-in at this level. And you raised some really important points there. I mean, I think for the housing sector in particular, the future supply chain needs, and that's a question for this project, isn't it? It's like with the 3 major housing associations on board, are there potential collaborative opportunities? And yeah, future trends, upskilling and providing that support to the marketplace to know what the opportunities are going to be. Yeah, great, really great contribution. Julie, do you want to come in on that in particular?
Yeah, would you mind? Sorry, I'm very busily taking notes here, everybody. I have already got quite a few questions that I'd like to ask, but obviously if you introduce yourselves first, and then we can get on to talking about how I see us moving forward with this very, very exciting project. So just, I'm unusually quiet at the moment, but that will change, trust me.
Lovely. Okay, great. Yeah, we're really honoured to have Julie working with us. Julie's been campaigning on all sorts of things in relation to the foundational economy, and many of you will know Julie as one of the owners of a local SME that delivers services into housing associations and other partners across. So you've got first-hand experience and expertise, as well as passion for community benefit and everything else. So great addition to our team for this project. Let me come to Anthony. Anthony, will you say hello?
Yeah, hello, Anthony Pomper. Work for Avato UK with Sheila. I'm the head of customer services, so I look after our client relationships. We're a UK-based organisation dealing with public sector clients, but we are based, our account is based in Swansea. We have offices in Swansea, although majority of us are still at home, as a lot of people are at the moment, but see how hybrid comes into in the future. But we do use a lot. Avato is very much it's a German company. But it's got footings in Swansea, and it's, you know, the people who've transferred into the company very much have got Swansea at heart. Very much along the lines of we haven't got a policy around procurement to shop local, but it's our aim to look at the local market and look at what opportunities are there within Swansea before we go further afield. And as Sheila said, there could be anything from vendors rocking up to our reception, to cleaning contracts, car hire contracts, through to large infrastructure IT providers as well, who are on our books. and it's only when we go more national is when we can't find that avenue in locally. And it's not to say there might not be an avenue in locally. It might well be we're not connected with the right networks, or there isn't that framework where we can have a look at to see if there's that type of supplier in the region. But certainly our ethos and our culture is very much keep the pound local, as everyone is saying. So I guess our input here is one to share some of the examples where we do shop local, and look if there's any through networking and supporting this group, are there further opportunities to continue that in future, not just within Avato but across all of the organisations across South Wales. So yeah, that's me, and that's what we do in Avato.
Super, thanks Anthony, that's really helpful. And I think you raised an interesting question there about a policy. You said we've got no policy as such, but a clear ethos and intention. So that might be a point for us to pick up on collectively. How important is it to have a formal policy around local sourcing, and what that looks like, whether other organisations do have formal policies around local sourcing, or whether it is an ethos. And Marcia raised the important point about making sure that ethos is shared among colleagues who are kind of at the coalface within an organisation, because it may be the core values of the CEO in a company, but is it actually top of mind for those who are making purchasing decisions? So there's a lot of interesting discussion. Thanks so much for that, Anthony. Lisa, can I come to you? I know this is something really close to your heart at Pobble, and you've been doing loads of great work on this.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Lisa Marie Brown, Economy Enterprise Lead at Pobble Group. So over the last 12 months, we've been doing lots of work around engaging more smaller businesses for our contracts. So we've currently engaged around 200 smaller micro businesses through business breakfasts, through online engagement, and through filming. We did a recent film feature called Our Local Superstars, where we were engaging some small and local businesses into that, and we were celebrating local talent throughout lockdown. So that has been working really well. We've also done quite a lot of work around onboarding smaller business, so we can pay them within 7 to 14 days. So when we get new companies involved in the work and contracts that we're delivering for Pobble, we can actually pay the small business within 7 to 14 days. That's working really effectively. We're trying to do a lot around de-risking and taking more risks around working with smaller and local businesses. So we're looking at obviously distributing works under the value of 20,000 with only 3 quick quotes. And distributing that locally, but I would like to see that increase and improve more, where we can give out contracts up to the value of about 100,000, and there's lower risk to the business. I think we do need to become more risk taking and engage in small and growth businesses in Wales, and we also need to do more in terms of investing in smaller businesses. And one of the other things that we've currently identified is obviously with the last 24 months where we've had a pandemic, lots of small businesses might show a loss in their accounts. So we need to look at, obviously some of those companies will still be achieving great results. A lot of them would have had to have cut their staff by say 50%, and they would have had to restructure a lot of their businesses. So what we're looking at is obviously not just taking financial results or financial outcomes as a direct success criteria. So when some of the smaller businesses are looking to work with us, we're looking at other ways rather than just assessing them on their turnover and whether they've made a profit or loss. And I think for me going forward, that's going to be really, really key in how we engage with smaller and local companies. We're also just, I've currently done a mapping exercise of all of our development contracts, and we've currently got about £100 million worth. Of that, 0.25% of the community benefits, it equates to about £250,000, will be redirected out to local businesses or to small community groups. So I've been doing a lot around how this funding and investment can go directly to our tenants, and rather than just say, for example, giving it to a a rugby club or a football club or a local school, I've been redirecting those benefits out to young people and to women and girls where they may not have had a lot of investment into those areas. So I'm quite keen to do more work around engaging more women owned businesses, more female-led entrepreneurs, and engaging more talent in that area. So we're currently doing a lot of work around encouraging young girls into starting up businesses and encouraging young women to become leaders. And we're setting a competition called Pitch to Win up to £2,000, where I managed to get sign off for this. It took me about 6 months. So I'm saying it as if it's so easy to do this kind of stuff. Yeah, so we're going to launch a Pitch to Win competition so that community members and people from the local area can pitch in and win £2,000 of investment. And that funding would have been redirected from the contracts and then given back out to local people. And I've got to spend, I think, £4,000 before the 31st of March to pilot that in Pill, in Newport, and in Swansea. And I'm quite excited about that, because that'll obviously mean opportunity for local people, and it'll be redirecting funds out to really grassroots level. But it'll be a great opportunity to see what ideas people from the local area come up with and how they can shape their own community. So we're then utilising these small businesses to directly link them onto the larger contracts then. So this will grow and grow. And an example of that is we helped a young lady, Abby from Welsh Luxury Hampers. We purchased 20 hampers from her throughout I think it was the last 12 months or so. And I think she sold in December, it was something like 3,000 hampers. So it's, it was a small contract. That was about £1,000. I think it was about £1,000 that contract, but it helped her to win other work within the local area. So for me, I think it's about sharing some of these success stories and sharing, our like knowledge then and some of the SMEs that we may have already worked with. And yeah, I'm happy to share any of our contacts and small businesses that we've worked with. But for me personally, I would like to see more work distributed locally, which is something I've always championed for. So yeah, I'm excited to be here and just to share some of the work that we've been doing.
Amazing. And as Marcia has said in the chat, some really great examples, and it's your area of expertise that we're in here. And interesting to think about, on the one hand, the community benefits stuff, and amazing to hear how you're kind of redirecting that spend so that it's going directly to your tenants and members of the community, which sounds amazing. And then how that whole community benefits piece relates to procurement and opportunities for local firms to tender. Obviously lots of connections between those two things, and not quite the same, but lots of overlap. And it will be interesting to see whether there are categories where you think you're struggling to find local firms that can deliver the things that you need, whether there are particular kind of product or service categories that are more of a challenge than others, Lisa.
Yeah, one of the areas that I had a meeting with one of our tenants about 2 months ago, and they wanted to transform some of their green spaces. So we were going to engage one of our contractors to help them. And we actually spoke to them and said, look, if we give you £2,000, can you transform some of the green spaces yourself or work with some of the local people in your area? So we're piloting really, I suppose startup ventures really, but that it's all linked in with the foundational economy, and it's getting people to take action for themselves and how then they can turn that into thriving businesses. So it's been really, really positive, and we're just doing a community benefits report at the moment where we're highlighting some success stories. I should get a sign off of that within about 2-3 weeks, and then we can share that then with the group.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be amazing. Lovely. Thanks, Lisa. Lovely to talk to you. Charlotte's joining us from the DVLA. Great to have you with us. Welcome, Charlotte. Are you able to?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute for a second then, it wouldn't work. I'm in.
Great.
Hi, everybody. As explained, I'm Charlotte, Esther Williams. I'm from the DVLA. I am the commercial lead for our facilities management contracts. Currently, that's serviced under coming to an end of a PFI scheme. So it's obviously we've already got a provider there, but they are now looking to the future and what this will mean. And obviously SMEs are a big part of that for the DVLA. We're in a slightly different position to a lot of the kind of everyone else who's spoken today, because we are kind of, I'm going to use the word constrained because I think that's probably the best description. We're sort of constrained in what we can do because we do have quite strict policies on our procurement procedures, which would often be framework first. For those of you who don't do procurement, frameworks are effectively set up by things like Crown Commercial Service, or there's Buy to Wales, and it's a set of kind of pre-approved suppliers that you put a tender out to, and then you'll bid from there. Apologies if I'm telling everyone to suck eggs there though. And because we are a government agency, we are always pushed to use Crown Commercial Service. Now, my personal opinion on Crown Commercial Service is there's not enough local on there. And I think that's kind of one area that I really think needs, and I don't know whether this is something that can come off the back of this or something else, but I think that's where I think we lack, especially locally, because, we are all based in Swansea. We don't have offices everywhere else anymore. We're all based in Swansea. And when you actually go on the Crown Commercial Services, there's not that much down in Wales. So from my perspective, I'm very keen to see us kind of move where we can to using more local people, more SMEs, especially kind of in my sector, in the FM sector, because we're talking about grounds work, we're talking about stuff like that. So I think, although not immediately, but in the future, I think I can see a lot more opportunity, especially as we are very keen to employ the Social Value Act where we can. And there is a lot of scope in there for us to put the onus on our suppliers to use small local or to use more sustainable options, to use SMEs. So while we may not be able to directly contract with the SME, we can structure things so that it could be done. A lot of our, we have a wide range of contracts within the DVLA with varying values, but as I say, framework first is our kind of policy. And so there is, there are limits to what we can do and what we'd like to do, I think is probably the best. But I can see the landscape changing because social value is such a big thing. And also we do have, an SME agenda that we try to contract to a third of our contracts to SMEs, but that doesn't always mean in the local area. So I think that's probably what we find is that a lot of them aren't necessarily local SMEs because of the way Crown Commercial Services is set up. Take a breath now.
That is really interesting and useful insight, Charlotte. Thank you for that. It sounds as though we better get our heads around Crown Commercial Services and what that's all about, and what the opportunities are to get more local suppliers on that framework.
Yeah, I think kind of I think we were talking earlier very briefly about kind of what we do to support people, and I think that's kind of like helping them get on these frameworks, and that sort of thing might be where that begins, because it's not necessarily an easy process and it's not necessarily a cheap process, but once you're in the framework system, then obviously it becomes easier. So DVLA is somewhat more unique because we are funded by, we are funded directly from, we're not associated with WAG, sorry, it's actual central government. So it's a slightly different setup. There aren't any kind of provisions for us to use a certain amount of Welsh suppliers or anything. So it is a slightly different scenario for us.
Yes, but surely a big part of the levelling up agenda, you would think.
Well, I would like to hope so. Yes, definitely.
That may well come into the parameters of something that contacts I have in Welsh Government and Business Wales may be able to help with, to say who might be the appropriate people to have a word with regard to broadening the offer of Crown procurement services. I'm on their website now. Yes, so that would be a really interesting conversation to have, and I look forward to talking to you all actually, and very excited.
Very interesting. Marcia, did you want to come in there?
Yes, I was just thinking about what was said then, and the use of frameworks and also how they can become more adaptable for smaller organisations. And I know one of the things that is looked at there is DPS. So I think it's dynamic purchasing, and then something beginning with S.
Dynamic purchasing system. So
thank you very much. And the reality there is that gives the potential for SMEs to keep rejoining. So it's not, like a one and done. You have to go into the process at the start, and then if you're, you weren't in there and you didn't get through, you can keep reapplying at all times, and therefore it really benefits smaller organisations, with lots of lots in there. There's a lotting strategy. And obviously, if an element of that could be done across the region with a number of employers hooking into that and thinking about the purchasing power, it's easy to say, isn't it? Not easy to do, but it potentially breaks down some of those barriers that have just been talked about.
Yes, lots of interesting opportunities. Yeah, so because often with frameworks, if you weren't aware of it at the time when the framework was created, then it's another like 4 or 5 years before a new supplier can join, which is obviously really difficult. So that's what DPS is all about. That sounds better. But it's interesting, isn't it, about looking at what the real barriers are with those kind of large contract procurement processes. Lisa mentioned some of those when she talked about, when they're based on financial performance, where smaller companies might rule themselves out because they think, well, I haven't got sufficient turnover or financial records, and just the complexity of tendering. And large companies obviously have big teams of people who can spend their whole job writing tenders, whereas smaller firms, they're out on the job and they just can't participate. So yeah, lots to unpack. And I think one of the things we'd like to explore is contracts of different scales. So I know Lisa was talking about, they've at Pobble, contracts under 20k might be able to procure through 3 quick quotes. And we've also talked before about even just those sub 5k contracts. A 5k contract is a pretty big deal to a micro SME, and those are often much easier to, the paperwork is much reduced. So it'd be interesting for us to understand from each of your organisations what sort of thresholds you do operate, and the comparative ease or difficulty of quoting or tendering at different levels. Because we'd be very pleased to have some small contracts to get our teeth into as kind of those tangible wins, right up to those bigger, longer term, as Marcia was saying, retrofit contracts. Can we begin to think about how there can be collaboration within sectors and engagement with supply chain, looking at future skills and future trends? So we want to operate at different scales and have some great case studies to report in June across all different levels. We've had a few more people join the meeting, and I don't want to put people too much on the spot. Kay, I might come to you. You're here from ION Leadership at Swansea University, so really joining with a kind of SME perspective. But what resonates with you from what's been shared, and anything you'd like to reflect on?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, obviously, I always wear 2 hats. I'm half in the university engaging with students and from a learning perspective, but also that commercial element of engaging with local businesses and getting them involved within the university. And I think that's a huge gap that we miss there, is that obviously the learning opportunities within procurement, how to teach, how to procure from a local sourcing point of view. And that should be something that maybe local businesses should be coming in and presenting to on those sort of courses, and how we can engage with the university programs on that level as well, or even within our other projects such as ION, Leadership and Development. There's all different kinds of leaders and all different aspects of commercial that we deal with. So there's always opportunity there as well. And it's like, it's all very well us doing everything we can on the ground and implementing it, but if we can train it from the outset, then it's less of a job to do down the line. So that was what my thought went to when I was listening to you all talking. Also, from what Lisa was saying about the smaller contracts, I know that within the businesses that I engage with, that the payment terms are a huge hold up for these large frameworks. You know, a small business cannot afford the lengthier payment times and, or as you say, the manpower to put it in for the tenders, etc. So there are university people that can help with that as well, and there are sources within the university that can help with bids and tenders that not everybody knows about. So it's all about that information sharing for me, really. What else did I write down? I agree with, who was it, Anthony, who said that there needs to be some sort of directory or framework of the services that we've got, and that's not a bad standing point for someone like for the region, you know, to say, well, this is our directory of smaller businesses. You know, you can get it anytime for any sector or any industry, but it would be good to have some sort of referral on there as well for businesses that have used those before. So I don't know whether it's a score pointing system or just a like check a trader type thing, but that's where my head went there. I feel like I'm rambling as usual, Dawn, but and just listening to what you all say in terms of bringing those opportunities out. It again is about knowing where to look. Even from my perspective, when I'm on South Wales, it's an absolute minefield, you know, that it's not easy to navigate. There are contracts on there and the wording of them is, it's just, you need, I don't know, magnifying glass and 3 dictionaries and a thesaurus just to get through it. So it's making that process simplified as well. And I think from my perspective is just dealing and talking to you, to the businesses that we deal with, and feeding back to you how, you know, what their thoughts are on this and sharing the message.
Yeah, some really interesting ideas there, Kay. Thanks so much. I think, you know, you were talking about through ION Leadership, you engage with leaders across lots of different organisations, and just having the conversation with those leaders from different regional companies about what are they doing about, firstly, buying local themselves, and secondly, winning local contracts, and the whole education piece, and making it more of a talking point, whether we're engaging with businesses from a business support angle or students from a training perspective. Yeah, great insight, great opportunities. I think huge opportunity, more than we can finish in the next 6 months, but certainly loads that we can get a good start on. Gary and Kevin, I know you've joined since we've started, so do unmute yourselves if you'd like to come in at any moment and talk on your perspective on local sourcing and procurement. Kevin.
Hi, Dawn. Hi, good afternoon all. First off, I'd like to apologise. It just sums up the challenges of an SME. We had an emergency and we had to go and sort things out. However, I just wanted to say what a positive situation to actually sit on this afternoon and listen to everybody here. And you know, since talking to Julie on Friday, you know, I'm really looking forward to this progressing, and you've got our full support. It's unraveling, it's been mentioned so many times, unraveling the minefield that is in regards to having, you know, tendering and procurement. And we're open to turn around and having that the skills around to actually help us get on that ladder, because we've had some frustrating times in the past. And you know, us at Vindico, we've gone from 8 to 24 staff. We're really developing well in regards to tech and innovation, almost like a tailor-made software company. But we would love to turn around and learn more about it, and that's what you heard today. So it's a very simple situation. I know it came at the end, but I really am pleased that you were taking this forward.
Thank you for that vote of confidence, and thanks for being here from an SME perspective. It's such an important conversation, and great to hear kind of voices from all parts of the system. I think that's part of what we are hoping to achieve. Thanks, Kevin. Gary.
Hi, yes. It's quite a strange one, because we try and, within the Coastal Housing Association, we try and keep things locally as best we can. And we've had sort of long-standing relationships with smaller SMEs that we generally will just issue works out to without going through this long protracted sell to Wales Bible and booklet, whereby you know for well that somebody might actually win the tender and it's immediately sub-tendered again to get their sort of more competitive pounds, shillings and pence, which isn't what we're in it for. We want to keep it local and keep everybody within the area fed on the bits that we can issue out. Likewise with the recent tenders that we have gone out to, we've gone out to direct to those smaller subcontractors that get picked on by the likes of your larger contractors. Will go to the subcontractors direct and ask for quotes and prices from them. We're quite proud that we brought back a couple of members of staff from furlough by giving the smaller contract out, and likewise he actually sat down with one of our smaller SMEs and took them through a learning and development process whereby they became an accredited installer of some insulation works. So it's very much of our vein that we like to work on, is we want to go to the smaller SMEs. You get better value from them, and they'll learn how your organisation works, and it's sort of generally kept within the area, isn't it?
That's a great example that you've shared there, Gary, of helping a local SME become accredited in something that you needed them to do. Really great example. What's your role in Coastal? Can I ask that?
Yeah, I'm the asset manager. So my team look after the planned and programmed maintenance works that we issue out. The example I issued to is the optimised retrofit programme that we had with Zero and Welsh Government.
Yeah, brill. Okay, lovely. Yeah, thanks so much for that. So that's been a really useful discussion already. Thanks all for the pages of notes that I've made, and no doubt my colleagues have made as well, of all the different perspectives and insights on this topic. Julie, you said you had some questions to ask. Shall we let you ask us some questions, and that will stimulate some further discussion?
All right, frozen mouse. How awful. Okay, so there was just there were quite a number of really interesting themes actually running through everybody's contribution. Thank you very much for that. Not sure where you're at with sort of meetings and things, but obviously as we get further into the project, it would be really useful just to say that, you know, meeting with you, talking about the issues face to face, finding out what the barriers are for you, what the positives are for you. That's something that I can't really, I can't wait to get my teeth into. But some of the discussions that we've already had with regard to improving local spends via procurement have come up with quite a lot of challenges and barriers. And we've started to formulate some ideas. I say we've started to formulate because we've been having this conversation now for quite a number of years, actually. And so everybody reconfirms every time we come together what the issues are, what the barriers are, that there's very much a need for this. One of the things that we've kicked around previously was the idea of a supplier directory for local suppliers, and obviously that could come within bandwidths of what they can actually supply, because not every SME is going to be able to tackle contracts that go into thousands and thousands. Some will only be able to tackle smaller ones, but you know, actually bandwidth things so that purchasers can have a look. But I think the message that we want to get through as well is that we want this to become an integral part of the procurement process. And the first thought is, how can we localize this spend? Is this something that we can get this side of the bridge within Wales, within the region, within the city? So we'd like to encourage purchasers to have that as the very first thought, and then have it come as sort of second nature to radiate outwards for their purchasing requirements. So how do you do that? Would it be helpful to have a directory of facilities, of hospitality, of direct provisions, of I don't know, food, of all sorts of different things? You know, we can look at the sectors, we can go through who would be appropriate to match you with, or you can actually, because obviously it's not for the region to make recommendations. That way madness lies. But having had some knowledge of local suppliers and being quite happy to pop them on a directory and say to you, here we are, you're buying some flowers, Sheila, for your foyer. Here's some local suppliers who could do you a really good service, you know, and you can just say, thank you very much, and off you go. Or you can just check in to a directory and actually find a register of local suppliers. We kicked around the idea of even calling it Local at one point to take on giants like Amazon. So I'm not sure what a zon is, but yeah, so that's one issue, whether we gather all the suppliers together in a next event and say, right, come on, it's time to tell us what you can do, show us what you can do, show us what you can provide. And then another issue, obviously a much less exciting issue, is what you're doing at the moment, what you're doing in terms of process, what you're doing in terms of procurement, who are your platforms, how can we look at not just what you're doing, but how can we look at raising these issues on the Welsh Government agenda, say, you know, because there are quite a few options out there for small suppliers, for medium suppliers who are busy doing the job. That in itself can be a massive barrier. Everybody using different systems, not all adhering to one portal. So that, you know, there's work to be done there with regard to looking at sell to wins, looking at Bravo, looking at e-tendering, looking at Proactis Plaza, looking at Crown services, you know, and saying, right, okay, is this something that we can perhaps take forward as an agenda item to the City and County of Swansea? You no doubt are already aware of it, but wider than that, is this something that we can raise regionally and even nationally with Welsh Government as a barrier to retaining Welsh pounds within the Welsh economy? Another question, as I said, about the tender portal, how we celebrate success, how we measure outcomes, dynamic purchasing systems. Is that something that we might be able to do as a sort of onboarding entry level for micro suppliers? We've had an awful lot of discussions, and hopefully what we'll be able to do is not just be successful, but capture the information coming out of the study in a report with some very useful add-ons that we can take further to Welsh governments, to ministers, and, you know, affect change in really large scale and more meaningful ways to enable you all to do the things that you want to do, and that is to buy locally. Because if anything has come out of the pandemic, it is really that this is what we need to be doing. And also in terms of carbon reduction and in terms of the environment, it just all comes together and makes perfect sense to actually look to your near neighbours first as your first port of procurement call. And I'm really looking forward to working with you all on it.
You know, the supplier directory that you mentioned, I think that would be really useful. I think there's possibly already directories with like the Federation of Small Businesses, and we have got some of that information already available through local councils. So we've started to do some of the mapping of that, but I think it would be useful to have a directory for everybody to share. The other things that we're doing is all of our development sites that we host locally, we're having events and business breakfasts. So it could be in a local cafe or a local community centre, and we're actually buying you know, services direct from the local area, which is working really well. I think with housing associations and companies and other partners, I think we could do that on a much larger scale. That makes it really easy for the end user just to sell their services. So whether that's hire a venue, coffee, teas, coffees, you know, sandwich, that type of service. You know, you can just put them on a supplier form and then pay them within 7 days, either via a credit card or through your, you know, financial department via an invoice quote. So we're doing that currently at the moment. That's working really well. But I think we can scale that and increase the amount that we're spending. locally. So I think we can really increase that spend and do more things that will help more local businesses as well throughout the next 24 months. And one of the feedback that we've had, we've got quite a lot of success stories where businesses are doing well, which is amazing, but quite a few small businesses are, like, I'd say they're a bit frustrated, maybe a little bit demotivated, probably like all of us, where we've had lockdowns and had to open up and then shut down and open back up and shut down and open back up. So I think, obviously building confidence and, doing more of this type of work will be really positive for the local area. But I think if we can make it as quick and easy and simple as possible for the small business, because they're likely to be under, they're having their own challenges and pressures where they've recruited staff and some of them maybe had to lock down again or not had so much business. So there's some really, really good examples of great success stories. But I think as a group, I think, we can make a really big impact in this space. And I think with the capturing the case studies you mentioned, and we've done a lot of that through filming. So filming success stories and sharing that then with partners. And what we found, some of the businesses we've helped, they've then used the film and it's enabled them to win a larger sponsorship or investment or new contracts and new work. So I think creating some of this digital content for online as well to share, best practice, I think would be really positive.
I know I need to talk to you, Lisa, because I know that you're doing some really great groundbreaking stuff, and sort of pick your brains. Lots of other Zooms that we've had, and I need to do that. And as I say, I'm looking forward to having these conversations with you all, and listening to everything that you're doing and finding themes and converting those into responses, and not just into responses, but actually to drill down and make it happen for a few local businesses to actually, so that we can chart that. We'll have to do it quickly, mind you, because obviously we haven't got a great deal of time. But so, not necessarily a massive contract, but I'll be looking for opportunities to actually. I was speaking to somebody in another arena the other day, and they were saying that they were particularly looking for office furniture, so something fairly straightforward that we can say, what do you need, how can we match you, and because there's a great deal of work that will fall outside the scope of this particular project, that if anybody else picks it up, or if Swansea decide to extend it, then obviously it can go forwards. But for this project, I think it's going to be really important to get our examples of cogent examples of how it actually worked on the ground as well. So if you can put your thinking caps on, of because at the end of the day, the bottom line is it reflects so well on the organisations around the table today, that you're actually engaged with the local area. You've got your finger on the pulse, so to speak, and you really want to work towards doing something meaningful in redistributing wealth.
I was thinking exactly that, Julie, and and Kevin's comments in the chat, that it's really refreshing for local SMEs to hear even just the statement of intent from such large organisations. So I wonder whether that's one of the things we could do quite soon, is a press release about the project and about the partners who are involved. And Lisa was talking about local SMEs feeling demoralised. So perhaps the message that we'd like to get across to local SMEs is that we do want to buy more from you, and we are looking at ways to do that, and that we are committed to that as part of the kind of recovery vision for the region. I think that could be a really nice promotional piece, and perhaps partners around this table would offer a small quote to say, at Caredig we're really blah blah blah, because I think
just from the sort of SME provider perspective, because of course, like Kay wears two hats in this conversation, so do I. We've just been through a firestorm. I make no doubt. I absolutely have no doubt about that. And local providers like my own company and many others need all the support that they can get right now, because we're coming out of pandemic. And that's very often the most critical time when, you know, when everybody's in the process of a crisis. They, you know, it's like you get through it and then all of a sudden you get sick, you get unwell, the bills mount up, the tax demands, furlough stops, energy prices go up. You know, they really are going to come up against it. So I am more than able to empathise with their experience, having been through it myself as an SME director. And also I can see it, you know, from another point of view of trying to throw them a lifeline.
I wondered whether we could ask for any input from the room now about which categories in particular you think there are opportunities within your organisations, or if we're talking about sort of directory or meet the supplier type events, you know, which are the categories that might be fruitful for us to look at, and where you think there are opportunities?
I think like creating more wealth locally and encouraging more prosperity is a really good one. It's a good area because I think sometimes there's a risk to pushing costs down with small businesses, and I think we just need to think creatively around, you know, creating prosperity, building wealth, and, you know, if we're giving contracts to small companies, small businesses, that you know, we're actually helping them to grow and we're not hindering their growth. So I think we need to just ensure that we can build their confidence and build prosperity at the same time. I think there's been a lot of risk lately. I know certainly when I've spoken to quite a lot of the construction companies that we work with, obviously you mentioned, Julie, about the increase in costs, fuel costs, material costs. You know, lots of companies, small and large, I imagine that they're all just thinking, right, we've got a tough 12 months ahead, because we're going to have to rein in our belts. You know, we're going to have to look at ways that we can improve our delivery whilst being faced with, you know, some, you know, increase in costs. So I think anything that we can do around that area would be really good. And I just, yeah, I think that, you know, the directory is a good one. I think some of that data is already there, or some of it's already available through local councils. I've got access to some of that as well, with Women in Business, and I've collected some of that already. So if you need any of that for Blind and Mice and Pell area, Newport, that we're collecting some of that already. But for me, personally, and I think for the wider small business audience, I think, if, like I mentioned before about sending out a one-page document with some of the smaller contracts that are available through the shared group, which I know you have been doing, I think we could do a bit more around sharing that wider to say, you know, hey, there's these contracts available. Have you thought about bidding for them? They're, you know, top 10 contracts that, you know, this amount, and then looking at matching. So I think the matching element's really important. Say, the people that we know, do you know the contracts are available? Have you thought about bidding for them? And I think if we start to do more of that as a group, we'll get better results. And I because I heard people talking about the South Wales framework. It's not fit for purpose. It's very clunky and it's very challenging to get your head around, although we have referred quite a few businesses through that. But I think if we like simplify that and we take that out and say, have you thought about bidding for this XYZ? You know, you can bid in direct by creating a quick quote. They can send in a quote, and then we can track that success then through the businesses that win the work, and then do case studies on them.
Yeah, great. And that is absolutely our vision, is about the matchmaking. So understanding what the opportunities potentially are with your organisations, particularly where you don't already know local suppliers in those categories, and then we'll do that legwork and research, and as you say, promoting those opportunities. Does anyone else have any thoughts about which particular product or service categories, or any other ideas or reflections on the ideas that have been shared? Marcia?
Are you able to produce some sort of template that we could, because we're all quite different, aren't we? You know, listening to the intros at the beginning, and there'll be some of us are going to coalesce around some areas and others over others, and we might be trying to all stretch ourselves too far to find one that suits us all. So might it be that there's 2 or 3 that we could identify as something to try and get some traction against those standard categories, and focus in on those? Just, yeah. So if there was some sort of template for us to populate against some standard categories, maybe what that might mean about spend or how it could be lotted up, and then maybe, as I say, refine it to a couple to concentrate on.
Yeah, great. And it's true, and it's not our intention to just pick one thing. We'd love to have a range of different categories and different sort of sizes of contracts. So a template is a good idea, perhaps for that initial data gathering of who's buying what and where the opportunities might be. I did notice Anthony unmute and then mute again, so I'll come back to you, Anthony. Zoe.
Yeah, I was just like listening to everyone talking. It's such a diverse range of things that it could be, really diverse, from flowers and food to facilities. Somebody mentioned cars, maybe even car repairs, and IT providers, legal services, accounting, office furniture. It's really vast range, and I think, you know, we're up for the challenge of whatever that may be from the individual organisations. We'd be happy to take that on and research and make that happen, that you are using somebody new and somebody you might not have thought of. I bring up legal services and accounting because I used to work for a law firm, and it used to frustrate me immensely that some of the large employers in this city used to use people in London. It was really frustrating.
Yeah, it might be a conversation for you guys to take back into your organisations, maybe at your next team meetings, ask around the room who's buying what and whether other people have ideas. I think somebody mentioned earlier on, I think actually it was you, Marcia, that it's those people who are making the buying decisions day to day that perhaps, you know, are looking on Amazon or perhaps not thinking local. So do take that question back to your teams and say, what are the sorts of opportunities we've got on the horizon in the next couple of months that for the region could potentially support.
Merch.
Merch, yeah, you've all got an upcoming Swansea City Centre conference to get ready for, so you probably need...
We can get you all signs for your office saying, what have you done today to make you feel local?
Oh yeah, that's right. I think that mindset change is really important. Anthony, am I right? Were you going to come in there?
Yeah, it's building on what Zoe said, really. I think it's an A to Z for us, really, in terms of suppliers we use. It's, you know, we facility contracts, IT cloud providers, car hire, stationery, food and drink, people as well. We tend to do a lot of people, so we've got a broad range of skill sets where we use consultancy firms where you might not have the skill set within the region, you know, and you know, we're trying to work with colleges and the universities as much as we can to bring skills in permanently into our organization, but we lean on consultancy suppliers as well to provide us with unique sort of IT skills as well. So, you know, and there might be something in the community we're just not aware of, which would give us that opportunity to learn from, or bring in from local sources. So I think they're the key things for us, really, just building on what Zoe said. I think it's office/business services type arrangement where the A to Z applies, really.
Brilliant, thank you. And do you think there are, and would you be able to tell us what the different kind of thresholds are as to what level you need to bring in different procurement processes? So is there such a thing as a sub 5k contract through Avato that's much easier to find a local supplier for? Do you have an awareness of different thresholds and different procedures that apply?
Yeah, we've got policies, so if it goes above a certain threshold, I'll need to get the detail on the policies, but when it hits certain thresholds, you know, you've got to have the, you know, your free quotes, or you've got to, you know, I know Charlotte working on the, because we're also involved with the Avato's on the Crown Commercial Framework, so we understand that as well in terms of us as a supplier to government, as Avato as a supplier. But you know, for local suppliers that Avato use, you know, we do, and it's down to us as individuals. Like I'm as a head of service, you know, I'll have so much expenditure in my budget line where I'll be able to say, right, okay, I can go and source this locally. And, you know, my natural mindset is to look local. Whereas somebody who's sitting next to me might not have that mindset, and it's a cultural thing, it's an ethos thing, it comes back to that. But the policies, yeah, you know, it could be, I'm empowered to do so much locally and source at a certain contract value and look at single source. And then if it goes above certain thresholds, we might have to go out and do multi-tenders, but then at the same time, there's no stopping us go locally for those multi-tenders. You know, it's down to our gift to define that. But then, you know, in terms of thresholds, you know, in terms of examples within Avato, you know, we've got single sole traders we work with who come in to support staff like health and well-being people who are local people who we've employed to come in and do that work. We've got like facility providers and partners who, again, local headquarters in Swansea who do all of our facility contracts. And we've got multi-million-pound cloud providers who are on our doorstep as well. So, you know, there is a policy, but, you know, I think, you know, you can weave into that, you know, the local element of it. I just think that's when policy and ethos combine, I guess.
Really, really helpful. Thanks, Anthony. I think one of the things we might seek to do then later in the week is send you all a list of questions that you could perhaps find us some answers to. One of the interesting ones that came up in what Julie was saying was kind of mapping all the different frameworks and portals that you're currently using. So that would be interesting for SMEs to have an awareness of all the different places they should be looking, and for us to sort of just map that jungle a little bit, but then we'll have some other questions like what are your thresholds for different values of contract, and what categories you see opportunities in. Kay, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, depending on the size of the organisation, it's what their procurement policies are as well that would be interesting to the smaller supplier. So, for example, with the university, we don't have a framework as such. We do have a procurement supplier list, and anybody can go on that list at any time. So it's smaller companies are putting themselves off thinking that that's a framework situation. They've got to wait 2 to 5 years to go on board. I'm missing out on opportunities. And obviously we can recommend departmentally suppliers. There's no central system, which I know is absolutely bizarre, and every department uses their own different list, but you know, it's a public sector, and as we all know, they don't talk to each other that well. So, but there are things they're trying to do internally to manage that process. But it is just about knowing that information from the inside and sharing it with the outside as well. So I thought that might be another element we could put on the directory.
Yes, that's useful insight, and in a way useful to know actually that all the university departments do it themselves, and it may be a job for Julie to reach out to some of those different departments and get them engaged.
It is up to a certain spend, but I can't remember what it is. I think it's like 20 grand or something like that. But yes, it is very much, there's lots of departments for you to talk to, Julie.
Yes, and as I say, those small contracts, they can be a big deal for a local micro business. Marcia.
Just before we go into the detail and start collecting data and templates, is it worth just sharing so we're really clear what the definition of local is? You know, because you always have that, well, there's this organisation and they've got a regional headquarters here, or well, this is a national firm. So I think it would just be helpful for us as we, in terms of thinking about what the outcomes of the project are, that we're clear on what we mean by local that we're trying to encourage. Does that make sense?
Oh, that really does make sense. I think that's a really interesting point, and we ought to figure that one out, because there are global companies with regional or local offices, aren't there? So yes, understanding what they might be. Julie, did you want to share some insight on that?
Just to say, really, that from my perspective, I see it very much like pebble in a pond, you know, which sort of radiates outwards. You've got your sort of very small micro business opportunities in villages and very small hamlets, to towns to cities to, you know, and out it goes really. And depending on the size of the spend, I suppose that's which ring you're going to pitch for. You know, if you take for this project, obviously it, you know, we would consider, I think, local to be the region. So not just, you know, Swansea. So the parameters for the region, you know, is for the region that we find ourselves in. But then broader than that, obviously, looking at increasing spend throughout Wales, because obviously, you know, there are Welsh companies north and south, you know, of the border, and they work throughout Wales, like ourselves. You know, we work in the region all over we work throughout Wales, and there are lots of businesses like my own which do that. So,
I think you know, we're funded by Swansea Council for this specific project, so they want to see Swansea success stories. We're a regional organisation, so we want to see South West Wales. But I also think Marcia's point about whether a company is an indigenous local company versus whether it is a local office of a global corporation or even a UK company with a local office. And then the other question, of course, is who are their suppliers? So you might buy stationery from a local stationery business, but where are they getting their stationery from? So that's an interesting one as well. And you could go on and on asking the same question over and over. And perhaps what we also need to do as part of the communications piece and the culture shift piece, which I think is a big part of what we want to do, is encourage small businesses to look at their own supply chains as well and wear that as a badge of honour, so they can say when tendering or quoting, you know, 80% of our spend is with local companies. Anthony,
I think Sheila wanted to come in.
Sheila, sorry, yes.
I just wanted to ask a question. With some of the local companies, and we've done loads on looking for local on Google, just say for flowers for the reception area, and the majority of them don't want to pay by PO. Does anybody else have that issue?
Yeah, so they want payment in cash.
Yeah,
with
yeah.
order. Well, that's really interesting, isn't it? And a conversation to have with suppliers.
I think, yeah, the larger organisations tend to have a procurement route by purchase order and invoice, so it just doesn't mould to the local supplier base, you know, the smaller suppliers, and I think that's where we've seen barriers previously.
Thanks for that. Yeah, interesting to note some of those barriers that hadn't occurred to us already. Thanks, Sheila. I can see that would be an issue.
I think a lot of that probably comes down to the immediacy, because obviously they have to pay for things straight away. They don't have procurement arrangements with their suppliers. They don't get 30 days. So whatever they give to you comes out of their piggy bank, so to speak. So, you know, and it's quite difficult for them to set up purchasing systems.
It may be that, and it also may be that they just haven't understood that some buyers need to pay that way, and that actually if it's a big recurring monthly order, then they'd be perfectly able to just tailor there. So it's probably needs change on both sides. Lisa had some great examples about making sure they are able to pay those invoices within 7 to 14 days. But then on the other side, companies need to be able to send an invoice and know how that might work. Gary, oh, sorry, yeah, Lisa.
Send them a code and then they send an invoice in that's paid within 7 days, usually 9 times out of 10. And we've managed to work with the finance team just to get that set up, and it's working really well. And a lot of sometimes it's up to 14 days, but a lot of the smaller businesses are really happy, you know, with that payment, and that it's quick and effective. And I think we do need to modernise the way we're making payments as organisations, because I think, you know, in today's day and age, people don't tend to wait more than 14 days for payments, unfortunately. So I think, like, you know, with the work and the contracts that we're delivering, I think, for me personally, I think I would champion like a 14-day payment term, because I think that's good for everybody. And I think, you know, it's only a case of like chatting to your finance team or saying, you know, can you help me out with this? So I've got one. Can you pay this within 7 days, please? And they just put the payment through. and that's really, really helpful. It's helpful for the person, and also like no one wants to wait up to 90 days these days for payments, like no one. So I think, if we can get our head around these quick payment terms, I think we'll engage more smaller businesses. And I think once we, get our heads around that, it'll make it more attractive for smaller businesses and those self-employed to want to work with larger organisations as well. Because a lot of people I speak to, like self-employed, they say, I worked with a housing association for years, they're really slow at paying, they never pay their bills on time, the invoice got lost, I mean, it's just an example. Sometimes it works well, but I think what happens then is the self-employed person gets a bit fed up and they just go and do their own private work where they can get, whether it's cash in hand or paid at the end of the week. So I think if we start modernising our services and how we deliver, people at the moment are obviously going into like cryptocurrency and things like that, where we paid instant payments. So I think unless we start modernising, how we're delivering payments for services, we'll get left behind. So I think, now's a good time to look at that and to make that happen.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Lisa. I'm mindful of everybody's time, but really keen to hear any other thoughts or ideas from the group. Gary?
Yes, I was just sort of following on with what Lisa was just saying. We're very much, when a contractor comes on board with us, we ask them what their payment terms are. So it's no longer, I've worked on the main contractor side with, as Lisa was mentioning, 90 days was common practice. And to be honest, that cripples a small contractor, and they don't want to work in that way either. So when we take them on board as a housing association, we'll arrange payments of 7 to 14 days if that's what they would prefer. Generally it's within a 14-day payment terms that we offer. We've also got the government procurement cards. So if we're buying services locally, then we can instantly pay for that as one-off. We don't have to go through the rigmarole of purchase orders and going through umpteen departments. And I think that has to be down to the organisations to make sure they empower their staff that they can actually go out and do this, rather than this alienated procurement teams, sub-teams and everything like that. It becomes so much red tape around these that we need to totally really understand what we're trying to do, and that is to make sure that we get a service that's good for us and good for the local supplier. Having these large procurement teams and sections sort of does hinder this unless they're willing to totally rip up the rule book and start again.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Gary. And I've noted that down. Organisations need to empower their teams, and there are some practical things that can be done. That's a great insight. Any final thoughts? You've given us absolutely loads of really valuable information to take away. So I think it's been a really useful session from our perspective in shaping the project as it goes forward, and great to have your buy-in and involvement. And unless there are any other final hands up, I think we better let you go off and get on with the rest of your afternoon. But we will reconvene. We will be in touch by email, and Julie will be reaching out to the right person within your organisations to have a bit more of a detailed chat. But do, as an action for you guys to take away, if you could just start thinking about opportunities or upcoming contracts and having those conversations within your organisations, so that when we speak again over the next week or so, we can really start getting down to identify those particular contracts or categories or requests for quotes that we can share with the business community, and start doing the research in particular categories that might be suitable to really get some great success stories. But yeah, loads and loads of value in today's conversation, and really exciting for all of us to be able to hopefully make some progress on all of this. And the learning and the stuff that's already happening within your organisations is a really great story already. So we'll think about how we can turn that into a encouraging piece of article or press release for the local media to encourage SMEs to think that we are on their side and we're trying to make this happen. Lovely. Thanks so much for all your time, and we will keep in touch.